Chapter 247, Setting the Stage 1. The moment I realized I was late, I jumped up from my spot. I pulled out my phone and quickly straightened my clothes before grabbing my things and heading for the door. But just before I left, I paused and glanced back at the team leader. She was sleeping soundly, with no care for the world. "This bitch. I kicked her. Lake." She let out a yelp as she snapped out of her sleep. I didn't care to see her reaction as I made a dash out of the room shortly after. Of course, the moment I got out, her curses were loud enough for me to hear. "Hey, get back here." That made me feel a little bit better. In the end, I didn't manage to learn a single thing from her. All I did was shove one drink after another. My head hurt like crazy, and I smelled like alcohol. Not only that, but I had also skipped my morning exercise. Fuck it, I'll do it when I get back from work. Thankfully, the location of the place we were at wasn't far from the guild, as I hastily reached for the elevator and selected the lowest floor. I needed to make a quick jump to my office to get some spare clothes. I couldn't present myself in my current state. My clothes were all wrinkled up, and a strong smell of alcohol came out of my body. I wanted to take a shower, but there was no time for that. Ding! Once the doors opened, I made a dash for the main area. However, right as I turned around and looked away from the mirror, a familiar figure greeted me. "Seth." Kyle stared at me in confusion. Zoe and a few others stood next to him, as they all gave me a weird look. They could all probably smell the alcohol. Why do you smell like alcohol? No, why are you— Oh, wait. Kyle's eyes widened in realization as he looked at me. Right. You were having dinner with the team leader, right? Kyle nodded in understanding as he placed his hand over my shoulder. He looked at me with what felt like sympathy. "I get you." He wasn't the only one who looked at me like that. The others were the same. Even Zoe gave me a small nod of encouragement. "What? Things will get better." That was the last thing Kyle said before entering the elevator with the others. As the doors closed, I still remained in the same spot, stunned. I wasn't the only victim. Clank. Opening the door of room 507, I saw everyone stop as they turned their attention towards me. I didn't show any expression as I calmly walked towards my desk and tossed a file down. I just changed and put a lot of perfume. Nobody should notice a thing. I turned back to look at the others. However, just before I could get any words out, Mia interrupted. What the hell is this smell?" Her face scrunched up as she looked at me. The others also showed similar expression. While they tried their best to hide their expression, I still managed to pick up on them as my lip twitched. Mia beat me before I could reply. "Did you dump a whole perfume bottle on yourself?" I couldn't deny it, I sort of did. But I had a good reason for that. I tried to explain myself, but Mia wouldn't let me. "Did you go on a date and get dumped?" "What? That's ridiculous." Mia and her delusions. I shook my head and thought the others would also find her reasoning to be absurd, but the moment I looked up, all I saw was the same look of sympathy on their faces, almost as if they all were thinking, that explains everything. "No, you're wrong." I tried to correct their thoughts, but it looked like they had all made up their minds. "Like I said, no, I am the victim here." "Oh, yeah," Joanna said while nodding. Sarah nodded silently, while Min followed right after her. Nora just shook her head, while Neil lifted his glasses up. "I've been there before, I get you." What the fuck?" I looked at my team and their pitying look. "Wait, you got dumped too?" Mia looked at Neil. He nodded with a sad look. "Clash in personalities and stuff." I bet the squad leader must have gone through the same thing. The pity on their faces became even more prominent. In the end, I just gave up and sat down at my desk. The performance report is back. Have a look at it. Do whatever you want today. We don't have much to do. I rolled the seat back and leaned back. Section Chief, I need to talk with him later. I really wanted a raise. Malavia Island stood on the relatively large size compared to the smaller islands. Unlike most islands, Malavia Island consisted of a single city, home to approximately 5 million people. The city was divided into 9 zones, with zones 2 through 9 radiating outward from the central hub, known as Zone 1. Zone 1 was considered the most important zone and where all of the important guilds were located. Skyscrapers lined the central zone, where cars cruised along wide streets and people wandered freely, seemingly without a care in the world. Everything seemed well as the sun scorched from above. Inside a particular building, massive monitors filled the space, while men dressed in black moved about, closely observing every screen. This was a monitoring station owned by the BAU. Their job was to locate any potential gate or anomaly forming in the city and relay the information to the guilds. Everything looked to be flowing smoothly. But then a sudden change occurred. Picking up a small signal coming from a certain area within Zone 2, one of the agents working at the monitoring station immediately passed down the information. Not long after, an agent was sent to scout the area. This was the standard procedure at the monitoring station. Did you find anything? Just then, one of the supervising officers walked up to the agent and asked. Yes, the agent responded, pointing at the monitor in front of him. I've noticed a peculiar signal coming from a certain area. It looks to be coming from an abandoned opera house. The signal isn't even that strong. It looks relatively small, so I sent an agent to check out the area. Good job. The supervising officer nodded. He stood with his arms crossed before reaching forward and pressing a certain button. Immediately, an unstable view of the opera house appeared on the monitor as the agent in charge of scouting arrived. The supervisor said nothing, simply watching as the field agent slowly stepped into the abandoned opera house. A thick darkness greeted them as the field agent entered, pierced only by the beam of their flashlight, which revealed swirling dust particles in the air. Immediately, the view of the opera house came into view. The old velvet seats were torn and worn out, with some knocked over. Posters still clung to the walls, though they were faded and damaged. Overhead, the chandelier creaked slightly, shifting as if moved by a breeze. The scrunching sound of the field agent's footsteps echoed as he explored the place. The supervisor remained in the same place, staring at the live view without much of an expression. Everything looked to be progressing smoothly. There didn't seem to be anything wrong with the place. But that wasn't for long. Flick. It came out of nowhere. Right as the supervisor was about to leave, the screen turned black. What's going on? Did we lose signal? The operating agent in charge immediately tried to fix the problem, but no matter what he did, the signal wouldn't come back. He even tried to communicate with the field agent. Hey, can you hear me? Why? Stop. The supervisor stopped the agent before he could continue. What B? The operating agent's protest died in his throat as the supervisor suddenly pointed to the energy readings. His calm face cracked, eyes widening in disbelief. Good God, he whispered, voice trembling. The agent mirrored the reaction, slowly rising to his feet, his breath quickening. Right now, the energy level. It was engulfing almost all of Zone 2. This was a massive disaster. The day couldn't have started any worse. Let alone the massive headache that I was experiencing due to the hangover. My very own team thought I had gotten dumped. What nonsense! I'll make sure to work them to the bone if that's the last thing I'll do. I clicked my tongue before leaning back on my chair and staring at the performance report in front of me. Everyone present had already seen it, and they were all just looking at me, waiting for me to say something. Do I even need to say anything? Everyone was quiet. Or it was more like everyone was too ashamed to say anything. I looked around the room and thought about saying something, but I decided that I didn't need to. Everyone here was aware enough of what had gone wrong. There was no need for me to say anything. In a way, this experience was good too. From this point forward, I don't think they'll protest my decisions as much. Or at least, they'll take my opinion more into consideration. I could tell that the way they were looking at me was different compared to before. In a way, I had proven my abilities to them. That made me somewhat nervous. While I had managed to clear this gate without too many issues, the fact was that I was still terrified of scary things. It was just that my tolerance had increased compared to the past. However, if I were placed in a higher-rank scenario, I'd without a doubt shit my pants. I'm also worried about the fact that gates increase in rank when I go into them. What are they gonna think if they realize that all the gates I go in will increase in rank? That was surely not going to be a good thing. My head hurt even more. No, whatever. Let me handle this work in front of me first. I turned the performance report in front of me and flipped to the next page, where a blank section appeared. A squad leader's role wasn't just to guide the recruits through a gate and help them clear it. No, they also had the unfortunate responsibility of writing down what went wrong, what could have been done better, and so on. It feels like I'm back in high school. Taking a pen, I started writing everything down on the paper. It was originally supposed to be an easy task, but it turned out that the problems that were present were a lot more than I originally expected, as I ended up filling the page and even taking extra paper. By the time I was done, it was already lunchtime, and as I raised my head, I realized that the office area was empty. No, not quite. Are you not going to eat? Neil was still there, seated at his cubicle with his eyes fixed on the monitor. He paused briefly, then turned to look at me. He adjusted his glasses. I do intermittent fasting. I tend to eat later than the others. Intermittent fasting? What the hell is that? You don't know? Neil tilted his head slightly, then pushed his glasses up with his finger, a habit he seemed particularly fond of. Intermittent fasting is a dieting method where you eat during a specific window of time each day. Within that eating window, you can eat what you like as long as you stay in a caloric deficit. Once the window closes, you fast until it opens again. This cycle typically repeats every 24 hours. Though, this actually sounded quite interesting. However, I wasn't really looking to diet. If anything, I needed to gain weight. I was still curious. But looking at you, I don't see why you'd need to do this. You look fit enough to me. I am fit because I do this. Neil corrected as he started to go into another tangent. During my academy days, I tended to be on the chubbier side. This is mainly due to my decree. I'm sure you're already aware, but I'm of the Hunter decree. My ability allows me to. Neil paused mid-sentence. As if realizing something, he looked at me and lowered his head. I'm sorry. Why was he suddenly apologizing? Was he schizophrenic? Raising his head again, Neil explained, I actually tend to go on different tangents all the time. I speak too much for my own good. I'm sure I'm boring you with my talk. He stood up from his seat and grabbed his bag. Even if I'm not eating, I'm sure you have a lot of work to do. You're not bothering me. I dismissively waved my hand at him. Ding! At the same time, I felt my pocket vibrate, but I ignored it. If anything, I was actually quite curious. As your squad leader, I'm interested in learning more about you and everyone else. I hated talking to people. I hated strangers more. However, I knew how to be professional when I needed to be. Even though I didn't want to socialize, I knew that this was part of my job. They, perhaps not expecting such words from me, Neil stood in silence while staring at me. His face turned complicated shortly after. I'm sorry. I rolled my eyes. This again. What? I'm sorry for how I treated you before. I paused this time. This caught me a little off guard. I didn't expect him to apologize to me. In fact, he didn't even need to apologize to me. His actions weren't even wrong back then. I don't thin. No, I have to do it. Neil stopped me before I could get the words out of my mouth. He pushed the strap of his bag higher. I'll admit, I wasn't very satisfied with the fact that you were our squad leader. It wasn't because of your lack of powers. I am fine with that. However, it's mainly because of the rumors that I heard about you. Rumors. Ding. I paused and frowned. There are rumors about me. I always thought I was the type to lie low and not bother anyone. I didn't expect there to be rumors about me, but thinking about it now, I guess there had always been rumors about me. From how I carried myself during the time when I was developing my second game to my relationship with Kyle. The fact that there were bad rumors about me shouldn't have come as a surprise. Ding! I let out a sigh about to speak, when Neil's next words made my expression freeze. They said that you like to take credit from others, and that the only reason you managed to get into your position was due to your close relationship with one of the star members. I shouldn't have immediately trusted the rumors. I probably should have come to you first and told you about them. In what? I didn't know what to say. I just stared blankly at Neil for a couple of seconds. However, in those few seconds, all sorts of thoughts crossed my mind as a certain figure popped up in my head, and my lips pulled into a smile. I didn't even feel the need to be angry. It's him, isn't it? He's the squad leader. Is everything okay? Snapping out of it, I raised my head to see Neil stare at me with a look of apprehension. My brow raised. That, he paused, pointing at his face. You were making a scary face, so. Oh, I probably was. But, just what in the world is going on? Ding. Feeling my phone vibrate again, I finally took my phone from my pocket and checked what was going on. However, the moment I did, my expression couldn't help but change. Massive rank anomalous gate found within Zone 2 of Malavia Islands. Thrall class and above suspected. The massive headline was the first thing that grabbed my attention. As if also receiving the same news, Neil also took out his phone and had a sudden change in expression. An A-ranked gate, Thrall class and above suspected. His shock was understandable. Ranked gates were extremely rare. In fact, it was so rare that the Severed Star Guild had only just recently cleared one, which was in reality the gate that I had helped clear. There was only grade that was above rank, but those were extremely rare, and in times that they did come, the entire BAU would be forced to move, alongside the guilds stationed around the world. That was a world-threatening event. As far as I had managed to research, such occasions only happened 3 times in human history. Why didn't rank gates show up out of nowhere? Staring at the news report, the curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the notification to get a better read of the situation. I wished I hadn't done that. Reading the first few lines, my expression grew even grimmer. The gate is currently estimated to be rank, but experts believe its level is steadily rising. There's a possibility it could reach rank. The BAU has been alerted, and all of Zone 2 has been placed under lockdown. My heart sank at the sight. Most anomalous gates had reasoning behind their creation. In fact, all of them had their reasons. For such a powerful gate to appear from out of nowhere, it didn't make sense. There must be some sort of reason. And it was that very reason that was nagging at the back of my mind. The more I thought about it, the more my heart sank as I scrolled down my phone and eventually paused at a certain image. It was an image of a certain building, one where the gate was detected to be in. At first glance, it was old. The paint had peeled off in long, dry strips, and the stonework was chipped and cracked in several places. Windows were either shattered or boarded up, and the marquee above the entrance was faded and rusted. The wide double doors hung unevenly on their hinges, just barely giving a glimpse of the insides, which were shrouded in darkness. I stared at the picture in silence before looking at the text right beneath the image. Velmore Opera House. Who? I took a deep breath, feeling my hands slowly starting to shake. I tried to keep my composure, but a creeping dread crawled up my spine as I gazed at the opera house. It can't be right. I really wanted to negate the possibility, but the more I stared at the opera house in front of me, the more the sinking feeling grew. And then, bang! The door suddenly opened, and several figures walked in. Squad leader. Mia rushed in with her phone in her hand. She pointed at it. Did you see the news? I have. I replied slowly while showing my own phone. It's chaos out there. Everyone is panicking. Mia then began to describe to me the entire situation. Everyone's heading back to the guild. The guild master ordered an immediate return for all members. They're even including the members from the other departments. I've never seen something like this happen before. Is that so? I scrolled through my phone notifications and saw the emergency message from the guild. All guild members, return to the guild immediately. Code Violet has been enacted. Code Violet. That was probably the highest emergency code within the guild. The codes were as follows. Code Green Singular Team. Code Orange Singular Department. Code Violet Entire Guild. There were only 3 codes, but rarely had a code Violet ever been used before. Lifting my head up, I looked to see everyone looking at me. Well then, trying my best not to panic, I stood up from my seat and headed to the door. All of you go down to the lower floors and meet up with the section chief. But what about you? Are you not going with us? Me. I paused by the door and smiled. I'll join you. No, fuck that. Forget about the raise. It was time for me to run away. What amazing timing, eh? I just rushed back to the guild from my mission and met you. Kyle dragged me out of the elevator with his arm over my shoulder. The amount of curses that I was holding back at this very moment. All of that aside, how are things going with your team? Good, I guess. They weren't good at first, but after my talk with Neil, I could see that the situation had improved a lot. There was still a lot of work to do, but we were headed in the right direction. Looks like everyone is already gathered. Upon arriving at the main area, hundreds of white chairs were laid out, most of which were occupied. The section chief stood at the far end, dressed in a neat suit, his expression unusually serious. Beside him stood several others, also in formal suits, their expressions just as serious and solemn. I spotted team leader Soren at the end of the row. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, her expression just as serious as the others. But after watching her closely, I noticed that every dozen seconds she would tug at the collar of her shirt, pulling it back slightly. She looked uncomfortable. You two grab a seat. Feeling the section chief's gaze, the two of us looked around before finding a couple of seats. Once we sat, we waited for several minutes until the section chief spoke. By now, Everyone should already be aware of why everyone has been called to come back to the guild. The place was silent. All eyes were trained on the section chief. An ranked gate appeared unexpectedly in the middle of Zone 2. The monitoring team is keeping a constant watch on it, but from what we've gathered so far, the gate's energy levels are steadily rising. There's a slim chance it could evolve into an rank. The tension in the room rose considerably upon those words. Everyone was aware of what an ranked gate would mean. Of course, the chances are low. However, in the off chance that it truly evolves into an ranked gate, expect Malavia Island to be entirely shut down. Only we and the other guilds will be allowed to stay on the island. By that, he meant that all citizens were going to be evacuated. We wouldn't be, since we'd have to help the BAU clear the gate. Several scouts have entered the gate, but we haven't heard from them yet. As far as we know, they're all still alive. I'm not sure if that's good or bad news, but the initial team did manage to find something. Pausing, the section chief took out his phone and connected it to the projector above as a beam of light shot towards the nearby wall, displaying what appeared to be a poster. All eyes turned towards the image. Mine too. The poster looked quite old and worn out. There didn't seem to be anything particular about it. However, as the section chief extended his hand, he pointed towards a certain part by the end of the poster. It was faded, but I could see it. Words became part of the audience. He began speaking. "Enjoy the perfect peace." My heart drummed inside my mind. "Witness perfection." I lost my breath. "The jester." I felt suffocated. Staring at the poster, it felt as though my vision was spinning. If I was uncertain before, I was certain of it now. This poster. No, this gate. It was the conductor setting up the stage for me. For the moment that I played my perfect piece, the one that I promised I'd play. Ba thump, ba thump. My heart felt like it was racing at a speed it had never raced before, as warm droplets streaked down the side of my face. I could feel my very own breathing growing heavier and heavier by the second. And yet, the only thing I could do was force down all the negative feelings. I couldn't allow myself to crumble. Not here. There's also a date printed near the bottom of the poster. We couldn't make it out clearly, but it seems to indicate something scheduled for 1 month and 10 days from now. I called up the system and checked the quest date. Exactly the same. Although nothing is confirmed, the poster suggests that this gate is expected to open on the date indicated. That means that we're in the clear for now. This is only a guess for now, and with the upcoming scout reports, we'll be able to tell more. There was a visible sigh of relief coming from the faces of a few as the tension eased. But that wasn't for long. Now, let's get on to the second part. The section chief tapped his phone and the projection switched. An image appeared on the screen. A man wearing a jester mask, seated at a piano. Behind him stood a sickly, elongated creature, silently watching, its gaze fixed on the keys as he continued to play. I didn't even need to look deeply to know who it was. That was me. Meet Vile 2013, the jester. The section chief's voice grew grim as he spoke. Not much is known about this figure. He first appeared during the recent ranked gate we managed to clear. Honestly, we wouldn't have been able to handle that gate without the jester's help. As the section chief said these words, his gaze landed on the first row, where a certain figure stood up. The moment I caught sight of her, my body stiffened. It's her. With short brown hair and deep hazel eyes, she seemed a bit shorter than I remembered. Her features were unremarkable, almost plain, but her presence was suffocating. She stopped in front of the section chief, then slowly turned to face us. The moment she did, I felt every hair on my body rise. I didn't feel this before, but I could feel it now. She was incredibly powerful. In her eyes, something about her eyes felt off. I first encountered Vial 2013 during the gate incident. At first, I believed Vial 2013 to be a human who had somehow managed to infiltrate the gate. However, after checking the replays, no human had entered the gate. In that regard, the jester was classified as an anomaly. An anomaly. I looked at my hands. Didn't think so. I didn't get a full glimpse of the anomaly's power, but from what I observed, it's incredibly strong. Without Vial 2013's help, clearing the gate would have been impossible. I suspect the gate's rising rank is directly connected to its presence. Clara's tone turned tenser. I previously reported the situation to the guild, and we've been trying to investigate more on Vial 2013. However, as if it vanished out of thin air, we weren't able to find anything about it. That is until... Pausing, she turned around to look at the image projected on the wall. That is, until Vial 2013 made its second appearance. This time, the anomaly showed up in a lower-ranked gate. Just as previously observed, the gate rank increased, and Vial 2013 single-handedly cleared the gate. To attest to this, we have several witnesses. Clara's gaze fell towards a certain section, and it was there that Zoe slowly stood up from her seat and walked up towards Clara. She stood next to her, her blonde hair swaying slightly as she presented her side of her story. I tried my best to listen, but I couldn't. A constant ringing sound echoed inside my head as all noise entered one ear and left the other. A creeping sense of dread was slowly rising from the depths of my stomach as I swallowed nervously, trying my best to remain composed. Out of everything we've observed, two key points stand out. First, Vial 2013 appears to increase the rank of any gate it enters. Second, it actively tries to clear the gate once inside. As for the reason behind this behavior, we're not certain, but we believe it may be tied to how it grows or evolves. Bringing me out of my thoughts were the last words, and the sense of crisis only heightened. Increase the rank of any gate it enters. I was practically sweating at this point. I had just entered a gate and its rank increased. While that might get dismissed since it had occurred in the past, there was a limit to it. If I somehow entered a gate and its rank increased again, then I'd give away my identity. No, I can't let that happen. I need to find a way to be able to enter gates without increasing the rank or just quit. It was never too late for me to quit. This was just a trial period for me. Aside from everything that we've mentioned so far, there is nothing else that we know. We've tried to look at the BAU's database, but there's nothing else from them. It appears that the anomaly operates within this island. If anybody has some information to tell us, please contact the section chief. Compensation will be given to anyone who can find anything. The conference seemed to end there as Clara turned towards the section chief, who stepped forward. He began to rumble about a few other things that we needed to be careful of. This lasted for the next dozen minutes before finally finishing. That's it from all of us. Guild events will be suspended for the next couple of days to weeks as we prepare to learn more about the upcoming gate. Prepare yourself for a busy month. A helpless smile formed on the section chief's face. We'll be having a lot of visitors soon. It's best if all of you prep yourselves for that. And with that, the section chief turned off the projector and dismissed everyone. Even as everyone stood and began to move, I stayed in my seat, my hands damp with sweat. The ringing sound in my head grew even more pronounced as the noise around me died down. All I could hear was the sound of my own breath and heartbeat. Everything around me seemed hazy as I slowly stood up from my seat and headed towards my office in the calmest way possible. All my emotions seemed to seal in that moment as the fear and anxiety that I was previously experiencing faded. I only had one goal at the moment: reach my office and boot up my laptop. I needed to ask several questions of the system. I locked eyes on my office in the distance, and just as I reached the door to open it, a hand suddenly shot out, blocking my path. Wait a moment. I looked down, sensing a pair of amber eyes locked onto me. The air around me felt still under her gaze, like she was pinning me in place with just a look. And then, you. Her voice reached my ears. Have we met before? Moments prior. That should be it from me. Stepping back and letting the section chief take over as he dismissed everyone in the room, Clara folded her arms while staring at the departing members. There were a lot more people than she had originally expected. As one of the first few recruits of the guild, she recalled a time when the number of members of the guild was hardly 100. Now, it looked like they had more than 10 times that. It's good to see that the guild is doing well. For a moment, she almost smiled. However, that smile merely lasted a couple of seconds until she saw the section chief turn his attention back towards her. I'm sorry to have called you back here. However, the situation made it impossible for me not to call you here. I understand. Clara nodded in understanding. Just not long ago, she was preparing to enter a ranked anomalous gate. Preparations for such gates usually took between weeks to months, from analyzing scouting reports to making sure all the right equipment was brought, and so on. Ranked gates were extremely hard to conquer. To make matters worse, they were also quite rare. Malavia was only so big. The rate at which ranked gates and above appeared was extremely low. It was for that reason that she had actually gone to a different island to clear the gate. I'm sure you understand, but I'm still reeling. The section chief sighed while scratching the side of his face. We bought the first clearance right of that gate. If this situation doesn't get resolved soon, we'll have no choice but to renounce the rights. The section chief's face turned pained. Clara looked at him helplessly. First clearance was the right to dive through a gate first. They were generally extremely expensive and held both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that if they did manage to clear the gate would become theirs. The disadvantage was their lack of information regarding the gate due to being first. Nonetheless, they had no choice but to do this. This was their only way to compete against the guilds in the main islands, which were filled with high-ranked gates. Put simply, the sheer size difference between the two islands gave those from the main island a clear advantage. I hope we can resolve this situation quickly. The only way I see things going well for us would be if the gate here advances a grade so that everyone would drop whatever they're doing and come here, but I don't know if that will be a good thing. With a laugh, the section chief waved his hand. Whatever, what is done is done. You do as you please, be on standby. If anything happens, I'll make sure to call you. You're one of the few dependable people in the guild. Understood. The section chief proceeded to leave after that. Clara stood in the same spot while sighing to herself. What a pity. Raising her head, she was just about to leave when her eyes caught sight of a certain pale figure. He had just stood up from his seat and was leaving the area. However, catching sight of him, Clara couldn't help but feel something was off about his back. She felt his image overlap with a certain something, and her legs moved on their own. After diving through thousands of gates in her life, Clara's instincts had become razor-sharp. She could tell when something felt off. And someone who had been in this business for so long, she knew that all instincts had to be trusted, even if they were wrong. Following him from behind, she saw him stop before a certain door as he reached for it. Right as he pushed the door open, she picked up her pace and pressed her hand forward, blocking him from entering. Wait a moment. The man froze, and his head slowly lowered to face her. You. Clara's voice lowered as she stared at him. Have we met before? and her gaze met his. The moment it did, Clara's gaze sharpened as an invisible pressure spread out from her eyes. And yet, met before. Seth's voice came out low, seemingly detached. In that moment, Clara felt that something was off with him. His gaze. The way he looked at her. It was almost as if he wasn't looking at her at all. His eyes seemed dead, and his expression showed no signs of being affected by her gaze. Does this even make sense? Her gaze wasn't anything normal. It was just the pressure that came out of her eyes as a result of all her exposure to the mist and gates. The higher one climbed, and the more they witnessed, the more powerful their gaze would become. Normal recruits wouldn't be able to look her in the eye for that specific reason. And yet the recruit before her looked completely unbothered. In fact, his gaze seemed to turn even more hollow. Clara's lip twitched as she looked at the man in front of her. She looked at his features and everything. However, she couldn't recall him at all. Without waiting for him to react, she reached for his hand and tried to see if he had any nodes. But nothing. Her eyes widened in surprise when she realized that he was just a regular person. Looking at him, she saw the weird expression on his face as he looked at her, and Clara let go of his hand. "I'm sorry, I just never saw you here. There's been a lot of recruits entering the guild. It shouldn't be a surprise that you don't recognize me," he replied, his voice even. Clara smiled. "There indeed have been." She then turned her attention towards the door where a certain sign hung. Seth Thorne, Trauma Counselor. Trauma Counselor. Yes, Seth replied while stepping into his office, the darkness that hid behind it slowly swallowing his body. "Feel free to make an appointment in advance if you wish to have some counseling." Clank. He closed the door right after that, leaving Clara standing by the door, stunned. She stood like that for the next several minutes before turning around. "Make an appointment." As she turned to look at the sign on the door, she pursed her lips. "Maybe I will." The moment the door closed, I was engulfed in darkness. It was quiet. I couldn't see a thing. And yet, I felt absolutely nothing as I stood in the darkness. I knew that this came all as a result of the side effect that I had been experiencing after the fractures I had experienced not too long ago. This is quite troublesome. I thought back to the interaction I just had outside. My attitude. It had certainly aroused some suspicion. In fact, it was already surprising that she had noticed that something was off with me. Thankfully, I somehow managed to get her off my back for now. However, I knew that this wasn't going to be the last time that I saw her. Perhaps it was better that I was in this state when she met me. Otherwise, with how I was handling things, I could have given myself away. I took a deep breath, feeling the emotions slowly starting to return to me. Turning my head in the darkness, I reached for the light switch and turned on the lights. Flick. A sudden brightness engulfed me from above, as I squinted my eyes momentarily before heading for my desk. But right as I moved, I saw something. A package. It was long and sat in the corner of the room. I slowly walked towards it before extending my finger and cutting the tape, using my finger as a black film appeared. Rip. Ripping the tape off and opening the package, I stopped. Standing before me was a keyboard. The one I had ordered. But alongside it was a note. One that read, "The stage has been set. Your turn. Duh. The notes of the keyboard were sharp. I pressed it a couple of times to make sure that everything was all right. In the end, setting the keyboard away, I leaned back against the chair and covered my face with both hands. The stage has been set. Your turn. The conductor's words replayed in my mind as my heart sank into my stomach. I'd known from the start that everything happening outside was the result of the conductor's meddling. I wasn't stupid. The dots were extremely easy to connect. And yet, hearing outright that an entire rank gate had been created solely to match my perfect piece sent a shudder through my whole body. Perfect piece? What perfect piece? I could hardly play the piano as I was still rusty at it. I had been practicing more lately, but it was far from enough. At the rate things were progressing, by the time the deadline arrived, I'd be turned into a faceless audience member before the entire world. I'd rather die than for that to happen. It wasn't so much because I was scared of getting humiliated before the entire world. I didn't mind that part one bit. My main issue was getting turned into one of those things. Just the thought of being reduced to a mindless husk, forced to endure the same music on repeat, sent a shiver through my entire body. No, anything but that. I needed to quickly think of a way out of the situation. But that's the problem. I had spent a good month or more thinking about this situation, and yet the best that I could come up with was a simple item from the guild. This was far from enough for me to resolve the situation. Not only that, there were even more problems piling up at the moment. The guild's top recruit was now on my back thanks to some ridiculous instinct of hers, and since every gate I entered seemed to rise in rank, I knew I couldn't risk stepping into one. At least, not while she was around. At all, if anything. The guild was now aware of the jester's unique trait. Thankfully, all gate excursions are suspended for the next couple of days until things are a bit more under control. In the meantime, I need to figure out how to deal with this, alongside the conductor's situation. The situation was dire, but not impossible. Pulling out my laptop, I booted up the app and immediately started typing on the system box. Are you the one responsible for causing all gates that I enter to increase in rank? Pressing enter, I waited for a response. I didn't have to wait long for an answer, and yet, each second that I waited felt like a second too long as a notification flashed on my screen. Yes. It was just a single-word answer, and yet, it was all that I needed to hear as I typed back. Is there a way to disable this feature? I sent the message again, and this time the answer came a lot faster. Yes. My eyes lit up. There was a way, great. I began typing again. How do I disable the feature? The system didn't reply. It just left me on read. I tried typing again, but yet again I was left on read. This fucking... I was extremely tempted to toss the laptop aside, but I managed to hold back, sinking into my chair instead. There is a way for me to disable the feature, but the system won't tell me. This must mean that I need to figure this part out myself, but I don't really have time to figure this part out. 1 month and 10 days. This was how much time I had at my disposal. It sounded like a lot, but it was far too little. Ah, shit. I covered my face with both hands as I tried to sort the entire situation in my head. Since the system isn't being useful, I need to think of a way to solve this entire situation. How can I come up with a perfect piece? No. How could I make it seem like I was playing a perfect piece? My skills fell short, and no amount of training within the next month would let me play the perfect piece the conductor demanded. I had to think outside the box. Ruffling my hair, I leaned forward and grabbed a piece of paper as I started to highlight all possible ways for me to clear this quest. Originally, the mission was a third-order one. In that regard, it wasn't impossible for me to clear. It was extremely hard, but not impossible. I had the means. Should I just try to push myself to the third order? The mission was of the third order, so it did seem like a plausible conclusion. However, I soon shook my head. That would help, but it wouldn't solve the situation. Wait, what if? Taking out my phone and looking through the guild database, my eyes paused on several gates. My heart suddenly sped up as a dangerous thought crossed my mind. What if? My breathing grew heavier. What if I try to contain an anomaly that can help me with this? That, combined with my second node, trait swap, made me feel like I could actually accomplish something. I held my mouth and thought deeply about the situation. Yes, this might actually be possible. But there was only one issue. I'd either have to enter a gate or directly go to the containment area. Neither was an option for me right now. The containment area was where all of the anomalies were stored, and it was under extreme scrutiny and surveillance. If I tried something, they'd know immediately. The same was for gates, and given my current situation, I had to lie as low as possible. In that case, do I have no choice but to try to find the person who lent the item that I wanted? I frowned, weighing my situation. Nearly all my options were gone, and I felt like a mouse trapped inside a maze where all roads led to the same dead end. Just as my thoughts began to scramble in all directions, my eyes were drawn to one of my drawers. It was slightly ajar, and inside, something caught my attention. An item. Curious, I reached out for it when... Ding! A sudden notification cut my thoughts short. Pulling the notification down, my breath paused and my eyes widened. This... Hastily pulling the notification down and checking the date, my mouth hung open as I suddenly laughed. I actually forgot. Today was the end of the month. And $747,348 has been credited to your account. It was the day that I got paid. And as if that wasn't all, I got a message from the section chief not long after. Meet me in the storage space at the back of the guild. The equipment that you've requested has arrived, and it's quite a lot. It's best if you check it out yourself. The VR equipment that I had requested had also arrived. From one bad news after another to one good news after another. I didn't really know how to feel at the moment. Nonetheless, the anxiety and stress from the situation were still ever present as I stood up from my seat and left my office. It was time for me to check out the new equipment. Here are some odd-looking suits. Supposedly, you have to put them on before playing. The machine heats up considerably, and these are meant to keep you cool during the experience. The section chief explained while holding onto a massive manual. At the same time, he bent down and grabbed a couple of dark blue sights and felt them with his hand. Feels like rubber, he mumbled while going through all of the items on the list. There were quite a lot. We were in the guild storage area on the side of the first floor. A massive space with towering shelves stretching in every direction, stacked with huge packages and equipment. Forklifts weaved between workers. The whole place bustling even more than the guild's main entrance. It was essentially just a massive warehouse. In front of us were 5 massive packages. The first one was rather big, and looking into it, I saw a massive capsule. I presume that this is the capsule used in order to enter the virtual world. I traced my finger along its frame, feeling a cool touch before pulling away. The sleek body, finished in clean white with neon blue accents, felt metallic, giving it a distinctly futuristic appearance. The other items in the packages ranged from weird helmets, suits, and all sorts of other items that made my head spin. Best of luck. Even the section chief seemed overwhelmed as he handed me the massive booklet, giving my shoulder a reassuring pat. The guild believes in you. He gave me an encouraging fist. I'd have felt better if not for the fact that his face was extremely contorted. He really didn't believe in me, did he? Me too. Thankfully, I wasn't planning to do this alone. I intended to hire a few people who knew the system well to help with my games. In short, my own team. And for testing, well, I have my own squad, don't I? Kika. Did you say something? No, I was just coughing a little. I'm sensitive to the dust in the air. Oh. The section chief nodded in understanding. He then turned his watch and looked at the time. In that case, I should get back to work. There's a lot that I need to handle and... I stopped the section chief before he could leave. Is there? Yes, actually. I looked at all the items in front of me. Looking at how many things there were, the main problem was obvious. I'll need a lot of space in order to operate with this equipment. Do you think the guild has some extra space? Seemingly understanding my predicament, the section chief slapped his hand against his palm. Don't worry about that. I've already thought about it. He looked around before reaching for his pocket and taking out a pair of keys. Here. These are. This will be your working area. I tried to get you a place within the guild, but there was simply no space. I asked the guild master to perhaps get you a location, but he's currently busy handling the matters with the recent gate. So I found the perfect place for you. The section chief slapped me in the back while laughing. You're going to love it, he said while looking all happy. And you know what's the best part of it? You don't even need a location to go there. You can go so long as you have the keys. What? I suddenly didn't feel so good. But before I could even protest, the section chief hooked his arm around my shoulder and dragged me back to the containment department. As we walked through the main area, all eyes followed us, and I wished I could dig a hole and bury the section chief in it. In the end, we stopped by the door of my office, as the section chief moved inside without even asking for my permission. Clank. I didn't even get the chance to protest before he said, "You're the last person to complain. Lately, you've been barging into my office without knocking." And so I just forced a smile. What a small space this is. Coming into the office, the section chief turned on the light and looked around. He looked quite amused by the place as the first thing he did was stop by the painting on the side of the wall, staring intently at it while commenting things like, "Not a bad painting. Where did you get this?" "It's a fake." "Oh." He then turned his attention towards the fax machine on the table. He paused and then looked at me. "It looks nice." He just shook his head and started fiddling with everything in my room. He looked like a child who had just found his new toy. It was right as I was about to complain that he extended his hand in my direction. "Yes. The keys." "Oh." I handed him the keys he had previously handed me. Then, right before my eyes, he stopped at the far end of the office, facing the empty wall opposite the door. Before I could even figure out what he was planning on doing, he stabbed the key into the empty wall. Just then, a door materialized out of nowhere. A loud click echoed as the door slid into the wall with a series of strange noises. My mouth fell open in a silent "oh" as I struggled to process what I was seeing. But as if that wasn't enough, the section chief reached for the doorknob and pulled the door open. Before me lay a massive classroom, furnished with wooden chairs and tables and dominated by a whiteboard at the front. I stared at the classroom and then the section chief as he reached forward and grabbed me before dragging me in. "I've been thinking," he mumbled, glancing around the classroom before locking eyes with the windows that overlooked a large corridor. "The guild's main building may be cramped, but it's not like we have no space at all. Actually, we do." He excitedly walked over towards the door of the classroom and pulled it open, revealing the corridor in all its glory. A long corridor, one that stretched for seemingly forever, as doors appeared on all sides. I slowly looked at the section chief as he handed me a file. It said, File 303. This is an infinite working space. Nobody will disturb you here, and you can make as much noise as possible. Hell, you can even run around naked for all I care. He chuckled after saying that. But I wasn't chuckling. Especially not after I opened the file and read the information on the place. File 303. Class Elsa daytime, Mayla's nighttime. Description: File 303 is a normal school accessible only with a specific key. By day, it functions normally, but at midnight, all doors leading to File 303 lock shut, trapping anyone inside. From midnight to 6 a.m., hostile entities called teachers emerge and hunt anyone remaining. The school's interior appears infinite, making escape impossible during this time. Warning: doors must be locked from the outside before midnight. I paused and looked at the section chief. He looked back at me and the file in my hand. He smiled before patting me on the shoulder. Just don't overwork, that's all. Lunatic. This fucking lunatic, one of these days I swear. I bit my fist while sitting down on one of the numerous wooden chairs sprawled around the empty classroom. The classroom was quite spacious if all the furniture were taken away, with the windows on the other end of the room completely sealed, while the others displayed the long corridor next to it. An LED lamp lit up the entire room from above, as the surroundings were entirely engulfed in silence. I knew the section chief was crazy, but I didn't think he'd be this crazy. This place was no normal classroom. It was an anomaly in itself. File 303, to be exact. The description of the anomaly was self-explanatory. This place was a normal place until a certain time hit. The moment it did, the entire area would seal shut, and strange creatures would emerge, hunting down anyone still within the school's grounds. Tick-tick. The clock by the end of the room ticked within the silence, the sound filling the entire classroom as I struggled to concentrate. Something about the clock felt suffocating. No, this isn't actually too bad. Let's not think it this way. Ruffling my hair, I looked around me. While the idea of being here was crazy, it wasn't like the section chief was entirely wrong. This place did contain a lot of space, and the best part of it all was that it was attached to my own office. The location was extremely handy. That's not all. I sat up and walked out of the classroom, staring at the long corridor that stretched until my eyes could see. Even if I do run out of space, I still have more space. If anything, there's too much space. If I ran out of space, I could just open up the next classroom. Space was no longer an issue. In that sense, the only thing I need to worry about is the time limit, but it shouldn't be too difficult to follow. Everything will go bad if I miss the time, right? Then, I just have to not miss the deadlines. Setting up multiple alarm clocks could help. Keeping a constant watch of the time could also help. Furthermore, I had also been going back to the dorms earlier. There were no real issues with the arrangement. Yeah, I guess the place isn't too bad. The more I thought about it, the more advantageous this place appeared to be. There were a few drawbacks, but they weren't that bad. Well, sort of. I'm still going to get back at the section chief, though. Walking back to the classroom, I took out my phone and walked back towards my own office, where I made a phone call. Yes, hello, right. I need some help moving some stuff. Can you bring it down to my office? The entire process of moving the items wasn't very difficult. The main problem was getting the unnecessary items out. That took a little bit of work, but thankfully, the guild had a moving team, so things were still relatively easy. By the time everything had been moved out and all the equipment had been moved in, the entire room was different from what it was before. It was emptier, but it was supposed to be like that. At the far end of the room, where the whiteboard once stood, was a massive capsule flanked by several monitors. The monitors were turned off, but once they were turned on, they display the view of the person playing the game. It also served to measure their metrics, from heart rate, oxygen level, and so on. This was meant to help me understand what frightened people and what didn't. It also served as a safety measure in case things went too far. I planned for the capsule to automatically shut down the game if their heart rate spiked too high. Of course, I'll only do that for everyone but the section chief and the rat. Those two, they could die. Maybe not just the two of them, the team leader too. She was walking on thin ice. Aside from the capsule, wires dangled from the middle of the room. On the wires were several helmets. Those were supposedly meant to measure the brain activity of the actors that were supposed to fine-tune the movements of the players in the game, and so on. That's at least what it says right here on the booklet. I tapped the hardcover of the book. Quite frankly, I wasn't so sure if I was right or not. The booklet said it was, so I could only trust it. I really need to hire some people to help me with this. I could do this by myself. This much was clear to me. I also didn't really have the time to start a new project. There were more pressing things that I needed to take care of. Like the conductor's trial. In that regard, I planned on spending some time to better learn the ways of virtual reality. It's best if I leave now. I checked the time. It was actually quite late. 11:31 p.m. I was just 30 minutes shy of the deadline. I was supposed to sleep earlier, but with how everything needed to be set up, I ended up staying later than usual. I gave the room one last glance before stepping out and closing the door behind me. At the same time, I locked the door. Instead of leaving right away, I lingered until the clock struck midnight. At that exact moment, something occurred. Click. A subtle clicking sound echoed from the door. This sounded like someone was trying to fiddle with the lock. Is that it? I continued to stare at the door, hoping for something to happen, but even as I waited for a couple of minutes, nothing seemed to occur. I guess that's... My body paused right as I was about to leave. I glanced back at the door and saw the handle slowly begin to press down. Clack, clack. It jerked twice before coming to a stop. A stifling silence took over the surroundings, and the door remained still. Whatever had lingered behind the door had left. Swallowing silently, I looked at the keys in my hands before leaving. Let's not forget to lock the door. As I did, I took out a certain compass and looked at it. I pursed my lips before shaking my head. What a pain! The compass was currently spinning in all directions. It had been going on for quite some time. I had tried to use it to help me, but the moment I did, it suddenly started spinning like crazy. Surely. At the same time, in a different room within the guild, 6 elites, Clara among them, sat around a large table as the section chief entered the room. A large projector hung from above the ceiling, casting a projection over the wall at the end of the room. There's good and bad news. The section chief's voice was somber as he spoke. The good news is that so far, the ranked gate hasn't made any strange movements. From the looks of things, the gate will remain dormant until the time when it needs to open up. The scouts that did manage to come out have also confirmed this, but there's also bad news. Placing the files on his table, the section chief sighed as he looked at the top elites of the guild. We'll have to push the date of the ranked gate excursion by quite a bit. Do you think that all of you can do it? If you can't, then that's also all right. We'll just eat up the loss. While the loss was big, it wasn't going to be any bigger than the loss of losing several top recruits. The room fell silent shortly after his words. All the recruits looked at each other, wearing different expressions. But soon. Don't worry, it's possible. Clara's voice echoed as she stood up from her seat, and stared at the title of the gate presented on the projection. The Hourglass. All right, if you all really are confident in participating in the gate, then I don't have any right to stop any of you. The section chief's face was a mix of worry and satisfaction, concern for the recruits and pride in their courage. While he tried his best not to show it, this ranked gate was extremely important for the guild. It wasn't so much because of the investment they made for the first clearance pass, but it was more because it was necessary for them to have higher-ranked gates in order to acquire more fragments. The more fragments they collected, the higher the chance they'd get promoted to king grade. This was something that the guild had been aiming for a very long time. Since all of you have made up your mind, let's start talking about the gate. The projection changed, and details regarding the gate appeared. From the scouts' initial reports, the gate appears to be a looping type. This is a rare type of gate, but I'm sure most of you have studied up on it, so I won't dwell on the details, but among all anomalous gates, this type of gate is the most difficult. Looping gates were to some extent considered the safest gates since it was impossible to die. However, they were also considered the most dangerous gates since the loop may cause someone to go mad from the repeated and infinite loops that happen. They were the type of gates most people tended to avoid. We don't know much about the gate's objective, but from what I've gathered, it seems to be a kind of chase scenario. Based on the brief clips I've studied, the anomaly prowls the empty streets of a small town, hunting you relentlessly. The goal appears to be finding a way to escape the pursuit. However, there also appears to be a dense fog obstructing the view. The projection changed, and several items were listed on the board. Taking everything into consideration, these are the items that we deem are the best for you to bring. If you feel like there's more to add, please feel free to tell me. We'll make sure to add them. Don't bother about the expenses. Given the importance of the mission, the section chief didn't care at all about the cost of the mission. He was going all in, especially since they were strained for time. I really hope this goes well. Oh. As if recalling something, the section chief looked at the others. This is also supposed to be a rescue mission. The next day, I woke up fairly early in the morning. Despite the fact that I stayed rather late, I still managed to get a good amount of sleep before heading to the gym and getting changed. By the time I reached the guild and stopped in front of room 507, it was nearly 8 a.m. Looks like I'm just about in time. I opened the door to see everyone already present. It was a gratifying sight to see as I headed towards my desk and placed my stuff down. Then, taking out my laptop, I drummed my fingers over the desk. Today was supposed to be a rest day, and there wasn't much planned. Looking at my team, I could see that most of them were bored and trying to think of a way to spend time. Given that we couldn't explore any gates, this was only normal. But, you guys look bored. Who said that they didn't have to do anything? Well, kind of. A little. No, I'm fine. There was a mixed reaction in the room, mainly from Nora, who was chewing on her gum while holding one of her earbuds. She had a face that seemed to say, "Leave me alone. I want to listen to my music." Well, too bad. I took out a thumb drive. Since all of you are bored, it's about time that you guys get another shot at the game that you previously played. I'm sure all of you have been dying to play the game. Key. I almost slipped up for a moment, but it couldn't be helped. Staring at the slowly changing faces of the team before me, it was extremely hard for me to laugh. Just thinking about what was to come while they played my game. Keku. Oh God. Mia's voice trembled as she looked at me. With a visible gulp, she looked towards the others. I'm not the only one seeing this, right? His face. Mia tried to stand up, but I stood up before she could as I tossed the thumb stick in Joanna's direction. Load up the game. You all are going to spend the next couple of hours training your teamwork. I'll be watching all of your progress from here." Groans filled the room shortly after. I could even hear the clattering of Mia's teeth as she stared at the thumbstick in horror. She begged and pleaded with me, but I ignored her plight. Based on the previous event, this was going to be a good thing for all of them. It would not only improve their teamwork, but it could also build up the experience that they lacked. I originally planned on supervising the entire situation, but right as they all loaded up the game, my eyes paused on a small gap in one of the drawers of my desk. Curious, I reached out for the drawer and pulled it open. It looked like an hourglass. I reached for it and pulled it out for a closer look. Both the top and bottom were crafted from wood, their surfaces polished to a crisp, smooth finish. Inside was a layer of black sand, and as I tilted the hourglass slightly, the sand moved towards the other side. How peculiar. This was the first time I had seen the hourglass. It was certainly not present before. In that regard, I felt a little creeped out. This couldn't be right. Feeling something, I reached into my pocket and retrieved a small compass. It was currently spinning like crazy. What sort of? Before I even had enough time to react, the spinning stopped. The arrow pointed at the compass. Ding! Not even a second after the thought entered my mind, a notification appeared before me. Congratulations, you've obtained a gate key. Gate key, a special key that grants you entry into a gate. Once the hourglass runs out, you will be instantly transported inside. The difficulty of the gate will adjust to the user present. I didn't even know how to react. I was extremely caught off guard by this sudden situation. It wasn't like I didn't know what a gate key was. In fact, I had one myself. I just didn't expect the system to suddenly provide me with one. This made no sense at all. And why now of all times, so randomly at that? This didn't feel like some sort of coincidence. Especially when my eyes fell on the compass. The fact that it stopped there meant this hourglass contained something I needed. No, I doubt this is some sort of coincidence. It is never a coincidence with this weird system. Could this quest be related to the strange cult again? Or was it related to the conductor? If there was one thing I'd learned about the system so far, it was that every mission was interconnected in some way. It was either about the cult, the conductor, or my past. Each quest had a meaning to it. It was just unfortunate that there wasn't much information regarding the gate that I was about to enter. Or maybe there is. I looked at the hourglass. Could that be a clue? I pursed my lips while staring at it. As I did, a new notification appeared. Do you wish to turn the hourglass? Play button yes, no. The answer was a no-brainer to me. If this really connected with one of my other quests, then yes. This was the only answer. Tag. The hourglass flipped. There was something unsettling about the hourglass. Its fine black grains of sand slipping one by one through the narrow gap, as though quietly marking the moments until something inevitable loomed. No, that's exactly what is happening. I felt restless, but at the same time, this was something that I had chosen. The system never gave useless quests. Given how this was something of the second order, it was within my capabilities. The only thing I have to do now is figure out more about it. But how was I going to do that? So far, I only had one clue about the gate. It was the hourglass. What could this mean? Was this gate a time-related one? Or was there more to it? For now, I'll check the guild database and see what I can find. I typed hourglass in the database and was just about to press answer when I paused. Wait, was this a good idea? There was something that I realized as I typed the words on the guild database. That was, the guild can see I am the one who typed these words. It could just be me being extremely paranoid, but if I want to avoid situations where I can arouse suspicions, I'd better be careful. I wouldn't have cared as much in the past. However, following the recent exchange with the top recruit in the guild, it felt as though every one of my movements was being closely monitored. Let me be more subtle about it. I opened the web browser and began to type nonsense like, "Nice decorations for my desk, glass preferably." Once the results came, I scrolled through several images before finding an hourglass and pressing on it. I spent the next couple of minutes like that until I just started randomly typing hourglass everywhere. Even the guild database. The results came right after, and I took a quick screenshot of everything before closing down the page and continuing with my nonsense. This should be good enough. Once I felt that I had wasted enough time, I looked through the screenshot. Immediately, one file stood out to me. The hourglass. It was straightforward, and the instant my eyes fell on it, every pore in my body seemed to open, as if I just found exactly what I'd been searching for. This has to be it. At the very least, it was the only result that showed up with the word hourglass in it. It is also possible that I'm thinking in the wrong direction, but I don't think so. I looked at the small description that was left on the file, and my face froze. A B-ranked gate. No, this made no sense. This was simply too much for me to handle. Unless... I suddenly recalled the system's previous words, and understanding dawned on me. The difficulty of the gate will adjust to the user present. Everything clicked in my mind, and I felt even more certain that this was the gate that the hourglass was going to lead me to. Looking through more of the description of the gate, the feeling of certainty only grew stronger. This gate is one that the first raid team is planning on raiding, and they even have a first clearance for it. However, looking at the time at which the gate is supposed to open then. I see. It became even clearer to me. This gate was indeed the same gate that the first raid squad had been planning to raid. The timing and everything made sense. But I still don't understand something. Why am I supposed to enter this gate? What am I supposed to achieve from it? And I looked at the hourglass, and then checked the date on which the conductor's appointment was going to appear. My heart raced. At what exact time was the hourglass going to end? My breath shook as I looked at the hourglass. The more I stared at it, the more ominous it became as I matched it with the time of the conductor's trial. Looking at the rate at which the sand was falling, it definitely looked close. However, there was no exact date. I bit my lip while feeling a heavy sensation settle on my chest. Just as I was about to think of something. Bang! NGK. A loud noise shook me out of my thoughts as I hastily turned my attention forward, and I watched Nora stand up from her seat. Her face was pale, and her body was shaking. For a moment, she stood like that while trying to process what had happened. Then, fuck this. She tossed the keyboard to the side before grabbing her bag and leaving the room. Clank. The door closed with a loud sound, and just as she left, another scream filled the room. Hayek. I rolled back on her chair as her body shook. Another one had fallen victim to the game. Despite the initial chaos that the rank gate had brought to the island, the situation within the island wasn't as terrible as the people and guilds expected it to become. The BAU was quick and efficient in stopping the guilds from entering the islands. Given the nature of the gate, there was no need for the guilds from the main islands to arrive. At least not yet. The BAU kept them on standby in case the situation turned for the worse. They also didn't want the island to be congested. Nonetheless, the guild still stopped all gate operations for the following 2 weeks. While this caused massive losses for the guild, it was done in order to prepare for the gate. This worked out well for me, since it meant that I didn't have to enter the gates and risk exposing my trait. But it wasn't like I didn't understand the guild's decision. While the ranked gate meant disaster, it also meant opportunity. A huge opportunity. None of the guilds wanted to miss out on the opportunity. How is your current progress with the virtual reality stuff? Do you think you can create a new game already? Sitting inside the section chief's office, I forced a smile. Not quite, not quite. My leg tapped rapidly against the floor. I looked around, trying my best to maintain my calm. I barely had any progress in that department. In fact, I pretty much had none at all. The past few weeks had been spent trying to figure out a way to clear the conductor's trial, while also researching more about the hourglass gate and so on. Not quite. How long do you think you need? I'm not sure. Maybe a little bit after the ranked gate is cleared or taken care of. I see. The section chief looked a little disappointed, but also understanding. Then, as if recalling something, he looked at me. On another note, how are your recruits doing? Them. I thought for a moment before giving him a bitter smile. Both good and bad. Given that they had no gates to dive, most of them were bored. Thankfully, I had my games with me, and I had them train with that. From time to time, I'd make some adjustments to catch them off guard. The changes might not have been drastic, but they still raised the difficulty. So, just when they thought they were on the verge of clearing the game, a curveball would come their way. It was torture. Just thinking of all the times I had to keep my face straight while they... That's besides the point. Their progress was quite staggering. They were now at a point where their teamwork was a lot better than it was in the past. But it wasn't like there were no problems. While the recruits worked well with each other, the same wasn't true for their personalities. There was this strange, hostile tension between them that made the general atmosphere of the squad tense. It was rather uncomfortable. Still, at least for now, it's not bad. It hasn't gotten to the point where it's interfering with the team. So in that regard, they're doing well, I guess. My leg tapped harder against the floor. That's good to hear. The section chief smiled. Then, checking his watch, he looked at me. I understood the message and stood up from the seat, moving slowly out of his office before closing the door behind me. Clank. Done with that, I stood in front of the door for a few seconds before darting towards my office at full speed. I could even hear people telling me not to run as I sped past the area, but I ignored their words and dashed into my office, closing the door behind me as sweat pooled down from the side of my face. Then, catching my breath, I looked at the hourglass on the table. The last few grains were falling. The gate was about to open any time now. This was faster than I previously anticipated. The grains of the hourglass continued to trickle down. Every second that I stared at the hourglass felt tense. I could tell that the last grains were about to fall any minute now, but each second that passed leading up to that moment felt agonizing. Especially since there were quite a few things that didn't make sense. According to my estimates, the first team should start clearing the gate in a few more days, not now. I thought that I would be forced to do the gate with them, but that doesn't look to be the case anymore. In that case, I'm going to be going alone, a ranked gate. Just the thought sent shivers down my spine. Although I knew that the gate was going to adjust according to my current strength, to what extent was it going to adjust? The information that I managed to pick up regarding the dungeon was also extremely small. I did try my best to get everything that I possibly could to help me, but was it enough? I took a couple of deep breaths, trying my best to calm down while staring at my desk. It was empty. I had taken everything that could have been taken. All besides the fax machine. For a moment my gaze fell on it. Should I take that too? I wanted to laugh but didn't have it within me to laugh. Taking off my bag, I checked everything inside. From all the items that I bought from the system, to even extra stuff like water, food, rope, and whatnot. I brought anything that I thought would be able to help me with the gate. And just as I was busy sorting through everything, tick, the last grain of the hourglass fell. Silence swallowed the office, thick and suffocating. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming that something was about to happen. And yet, nothing. The entire place remained silent as no change occurred. Did it not work? Confused, I picked up the hourglass and flipped it over. Nothing happened. The silence pressed in, heavier than before, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Is it broken? It sure felt like it. I flipped the hourglass again and tried to look at the bottom. There was still nothing. The grains also refused to move. How odd. Rather than relief, a tight knot of anxiety coiled in my chest. I couldn't believe for a second that nothing had happened. The room had clearly shifted. Something had changed. I could tell. But what exactly had changed? I scanned the room, my eyes tracing every corner, every shadow, searching for anything out of place. And yet, nope, everything looks normal. Then, I paused at the door, my hand hovering over the handle. A sudden chill crawled up my spine, and my breath caught in my throat. Straining my ears, I heard it. Thump. The soft sound of a step. To talk. What came after was the soft sound of a knock. Staring at the door, I hesitated. Who is it? Silence. My words were met with silence. Who is it? I tried yet again. But even then, I received no response. A creeping unease settled over me. Something was wrong. Frowning, I pulled out my phone, my hands trembling slightly. Let me contact Kyle. I just wanted to be certain. But right as I took out my phone, I paused. There was no signal. I knew it. Something was indeed wrong with the place. How could there suddenly be no signal? Something like this had never happened before, even when we were on the lower floors. I would have normally dismissed such a signal, but this abnormality came right after the hourglass flipped. I was certain of it. The gate had already begun. To talk. The knocking echoed once more. This time louder. I stared at the door. Someone was standing right behind it. I could feel it. Holding my breath, I turned to the side and flipped the switch. Flick. Darkness took over the surroundings. It pressed on me in every direction as I felt a sudden chill. And yet, I didn't care as I lowered my head. That's when I saw it. The shadows stretching beyond the sliver of light spilling through the narrow gap of the door. I swallowed hard, feeling the fear crawling up my spine. However, I grabbed my bag and yanked out my knife, fingers tightening around the hilt. A shadow flickered nearby as I pressed myself against the side of the door, every nerve screaming. All right, calm down. This is just like last time. Staring in the Dreamwalker's direction, I nodded. Creak. The door creaked open, light spilling into the dark room. I gripped the hilt of my knife tighter, drawing in one last breath. Summoning every ounce of courage, I lunged forward and swung. But, swoosh. Nothing. I didn't manage to hit a single thing as I slashed the empty air. Hey. Hastily raising my head, I looked around. The moment I did, my entire body froze as I found myself in what appeared to be an abandoned factory, its ceiling lost in shadow, rusted machinery scattered across the floor, and broken windows that let in only thin slivers of light, while the air hung heavy with dust and the smell of rust. What sort of? I looked behind me to see the door of my office still open. Inside, despite it being dark, I could still see all my stuff as I looked back at the factory. Rather than me being transported into the gate, My entire office got transported. I tried to make sense of my current situation. I was extremely confused. But that confusion didn't last long. Not long after, a notification appeared before my very eyes. The scenario is now starting. Operation The Hourglass. Class Black Black Black. One abandoned factory, countless shadows. Somewhere inside, a relentless killer hunts. You have but one goal: survive. Every corner may hide death. Every sound could be the last you hear. Find a way out before the hunter finds you or become another victim claimed by the darkness. Scenario candidates will be joining shortly. Do you wish to purchase any item? From the moment the scenario begins, you won't be able to purchase items. You have 60 seconds. Reading through the description of the scenario, I felt chills run down my spine. That figure I felt before. It was the killer, wasn't it? I took a couple of breaths while looking at the timer that suddenly appeared. Yet again, I only have 60 seconds to buy an item from the shop. This was the second time that something like this had happened. Thankfully, I had somewhat expected this from the start and wasn't flustered. I already had some items in my mind. Shadow lantern. A small lantern that casts a faint, eerie light, revealing the footsteps of anyone present. The light lasts for 45 minutes. Beware, the glow may attract attention. Warning, handle with caution in confined spaces. Non-consumable. Price, 51,040 GP. I had been eyeing this item since I had become aware of the gate. Following my research on what I knew about the gate, I felt that this was the most appropriate item. However, I held off on buying it since I was waiting for the scenario description to appear in order to be absolutely certain. Now that I had seen the description, I didn't hesitate to buy it. Puff! The space above me creaked, and a lantern tumbled into my hands. Its cold metal bit into my skin as I examined it. The lantern was old, forged from black iron, with a large handle that appeared above it. Holding onto the handle, I looked down to see a small button on the top. I pressed on it. Flick! Immediately, a dim blue light flickered from the lamp, stretching long shadows across the room. The air grew colder, and for just a split second I felt a presence stare in my direction. My skin crawled as I hastily looked in the direction of where I felt the presence. However, all that met my gaze was silence and darkness. I swallowed nervously before looking away and checking the system panel. In particular, my gaze drifted towards my balance. SB 6087. Everything that I've saved up is practically almost gone. Thankfully, I still had yet to convert the money that I had received from my latest paycheck. I still had about 70,000 SB at my disposal. In fact, I had more than that. The guild had given me 3 million. Most of it was meant for virtual game development, but they weren't exactly leaving me be with that money. They still monitored where and when I spent my money. This was company money after all. Ding! The time limit is up. The shop is now closed. Best of luck. A series of notifications flashed before me, then vanished as suddenly as they appeared. The surroundings turned eerily quiet as I slowly raised the lamp. As the dim glow stretched ahead, my eyes froze. Footsteps. They appeared in every direction. Footsteps stretched in every direction. They shimmered under the blue light of the lamp as I looked around. The scent of rust grew stronger as the lamp swayed in my hand, casting long, shifting shadows around me. Swallowing nervously, I looked at all the paths before me. They all led towards different areas of the abandoned factory. The darkness made it hard to see where all the paths led, but I knew that one of the paths probably led to the exit that I needed. I just need to find the right path and leave this place. In principle, this didn't sound very hard. But at the same time, staring towards the pitch darkness ahead of me and looking around, I felt a certain unsettling feeling grow, almost as if someone was staring at me from within the darkness. My skin crawled. Okay, relax. The faster I get this done, the better. I don't know why the system gave me this mission, but it should be useful for me. Tightening my grip on the handle of the lamp, I started moving forward. At the same time, I checked the time. Tick-tick. It was 17:44. Step asterisk. The gentle echo of my steps rang hollow in the silence as I moved forward, the lamp trembling faintly in my grip. Its dim light pushed weakly against the darkness, stretching thin across the floor where the footsteps trailed ahead. My steps continued to echo as I eventually stopped before a certain point. I raised my hand and shone the lamp ahead. A white door greeted my sight. It was half open, hanging lopsided on its hinges, and the footsteps disappeared into the darkness beyond it. The faint smell of rust thickened, metallic and sour, stinging the back of my throat. I hesitated. But then, creak, the door opened on its own, as if telling me to enter. My instincts screamed at me, telling me to go back. But I couldn't go back. I gripped my knife with everything I had before going forward. Step asterisk. The room inside was vast, littered with broken machinery and towering shapes that loomed in the dark, twisting into strange forms that made me pause. The lamp's dim light brushed faintly against the edges of the machines, revealing little more than jagged outlines and broken parts scattered across the ground. My footsteps echoed louder here, bouncing against the tall walls like whispers that didn't belong to me. I maintained my gaze towards the steps. I could tell that these ones were fresher than the ones outside. They were brighter than the older ones. I swallowed nervously. I'm getting closer. The fresher tracks curved toward the left side of the room. I followed them, each step feeling heavier than the last, my chest tightening as if the space itself was closing down on me. Clang! Oh, there! The sound of something dropping somewhere in the shadows froze me. The lamp shook in my grip as I hastily swung it in the direction of the noise. Who are they? Nothing. Just twisted metal piled against itself. The shadows it cast shivered slightly as the lamp continued to sway. I bit my lips. For a moment I considered going there, my grip on the knife so tight that my fingers ached. I soon shook my head. Stay calm, just follow the trail. Just focus on what I'm supposed to do. I can figure everything else later. I forced my legs to move. The footsteps continued toward a far corridor, a narrow opening tucked between two large machines that almost looked like teeth gnashing together. I had to tilt my body sideways to slide in. The passage smelled worse, rust mixed with something else, something sharper. Something like blood. That's... I swallowed quietly while raising my hand to illuminate ahead. That's when I saw it. Streaks of dark stains smeared across the metal of a machine ahead, patterned almost like a handprint dragged downward. Almost as if they were desperately running away from someone. My throat tightened. Just keep going. The footsteps turned deeper inside. I looked at the time. It was 17:53. It hadn't even been 10 minutes since I entered, but it felt much longer. My breathing grew louder in my ears. The corridor stretched endlessly, narrowing further, before finally spilling out into another room. I stepped inside. This one was larger but emptier, with less machinery. The floor was smeared with dust and long, dried tracks like something heavy had been dragged across it. The footsteps in front of me overlapped, weaving in and out of the room, forming a chaotic mess of trails. I froze. The steps, I could see that they belonged to two different people. My lips parted. What is? I took a cautious step forward, the subtle crunch beneath my shoe feeling loud in the silence. And then, somewhere above me, Thump. A heavy sound. They. I hastily raised my lamp. The ceiling stretched far above, swallowed by the dark. No matter how I strained my eyes, the lamp's glow could only reach so far. Beyond that, all I could see was the darkness. Thump. Another thump. Something was moving up there. My grip on the lamp tightened until my knuckles hurt. Keep moving, don't stop, don't give it time. I forced my legs forward, choosing the path with the freshest tracks. My pace quickened, heart hammering against my chest. The steps weaved toward another doorway and I slipped through. Behind me faintly. Tap. Tap. My head snapped back. The sound of footsteps. They were soft and they matched my own pace. The lamp shook violently in my grip, its light jittering across the walls as I hastened my steps. My breath rasped in my throat, a certain panic starting to surge from deep within me. Don't look back, don't look back. But I did. The corridor behind me was empty. Only darkness. Only silence. I turned forward again, breath uneven. The trail led me into yet another chamber, this one packed with rows of tall shelves. Rusted tools and boxes leaned precariously on them. Some had already collapsed, scattering debris across the ground. The footsteps wove between the shelves, so I followed, ducking beneath a half-fallen beam. As I moved, the sound came again. Tap. This time closer. My stomach dropped. Swoosh. I swung the lamp wildly, its glow spilling across the gaps between the shelves. Nothing. Nothing but dust and broken tools. And yet, the hairs on the back of my neck rose. Someone was there. Watching me. Hiding. The footsteps ended abruptly at the far side of the room. Hi. I stopped, panting. My chest heaved with each breath, and the lamp trembled in my hand. The prince simply stopped. No exit. No trail. Only the blank white wall ahead. My lips moved silently. No, this can't be right. I crouched, placing the lamp lower. The faint glow shimmered across the ground, but there were no more tracks. Just a sudden, empty end. The sound of breathing filled my ears. Ha. It matched the rhythm of my own. But it wasn't mine. Slowly my head turned. Through the gap in the shelves, I caught sight of something. A mask. White cracked with dark hollows for eyes. Staring right at me. I paused for a brief moment, staring into those eyes as they stared back at me. Every hair on my body rose in that moment as my heart leaped out of my chest. Then, clank. I jolted back, stumbling into the shelf. Tools clattered to the floor with a deafening crash. The mask tilted slightly, fatting behind the shelf. I held my breath, desperately reaching for my knife. My legs moved on their own, scrambling backward as I turned and ran down the aisle, the lamp jerking violently in my hand. Run, I have to run. I thought about fighting, but it felt impossible. Luck. Bang. The shelf behind me toppled with a thunderous roar, spilling metal and wood across the floor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The footsteps followed, quicker now. My lungs burned. The lamp's glow flickered as my grip slipped, but I held on desperately. Ahead I saw a door, a real door. It was made out of metal, a little bit dented but intact. I sprinted. The sound behind me grew louder. Closer. It was almost at my neck. Clank. I shoved the door open, practically throwing myself inside. The room was dark, empty, the walls bare. However, I didn't care as I hastily turned back and reached for the door. Bang! I slammed the door shut, twisting the rusted handle. My body slid down against it as I panted, heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. For a moment, nothing. Just silence. The quiet dragged on as I pressed myself against the door, trying to will it to hold. I forced several ragged breaths, letting my lungs fill and empty before lifting the lamp again. Its weak glow stretched across the room, illuminating the edges of broken machinery and scattered debris. And then my eyes caught the steps ahead. They looked fresh, too fresh. And as I slowly brought the lamp up, I saw it. The same white mask, standing right before me. I reacted quickly, propping myself up. Holding onto the knife, I swung it forward. However, as if deeming my movements worthless, the man dodged the attack before swinging at me. I hastily called the dreamwalker, but it was too late. Something pierced my lungs as I stared ahead in shock. And then, my vision grew dark. By the time I regained my consciousness, I found myself back at my office. Slowly bringing my head down, I stared at my watch. It was 17:40. Tick, tick. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.